Hello and welcome to Lesson 12 on coronary artery disease. In this lesson, I will explain how the concealed threat is used alone without mentally presented ideas and how it can lead to health problems, serious health problems. We are told that bad diets and lack of exercise, obesity, a sedentary lifestyle, and bad lifestyle habits are the major risk factors for coronary artery disease. We are also told that other risk factors, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol levels, and family history. There is no good evidence for the first group of the diet and lack of exercise, etc., as being the risk factors. There's no good scientific evidence for any of these. It is the second group that counts as risk factors and not all obvious. Actually, this second group are the risk factors that indicate stress, specifically the stress response. And yes, that includes family history because that is not about genetics. It is only an assumption by medical scientists because they see it runs in families. It must be hereditary and therefore they conclude genetics. But it is toxic, inhumane people who are either members of the family and down through the ages, generation after generation, and they are people associated with the family, seeming friends of the family. And all of these inhumane people, of course, have some agenda. They want to control certain other people within the family. So they will underhandedly attack those members, and of course those members will react and thereby suffer harm, or to even kill a member of the family. The person's reaction will be a fight or flight response, a stress response. In a fight or flight response, the heart is accelerated and thus the blood pressure will go up. And we have to consider also that this sort of threat is not posed continuously. Probably if it was posed continuously, it wouldn't do so much damage. But when it's posed episodically and suddenly out of the blue, and the person doesn't understand what is happening, then there will be sudden, higher, and turbulent blood flow over the entire duration of the threat. And I will explain to you later why knowing what is happening makes a huge difference. While we are reacting to the threat, the higher and turbulent blood flow will cause damage to the inner arterial walls. Some areas are damaged more than other areas. Most particularly, damage can occur where arteries branch. The one artery branches into two sub-branches. These are areas where the blood flow is not even. It has to change direction, and blood cells may also crash into the walls, and even in ordinary, normal circumstances. So if there is turbulence here, when there is high blood pressure over time, then these areas are particularly prone to damage. Now, where there is an injury, then the body tries to repair the damage. But when there is repeated episodes of a high turbulent blood flow, then the repair jobs that the body sets about become damaged. Arteries have three layers. There's the inner lining, which is basically the endothelial cells. Then there is the middle layer, which is muscle cells, which is what allows the arteries to constrict and widen. And then there is an outer layer, which is collagen fibers, in other words, connective tissue. The injury happens in the inner layer. The endothelial cells are damaged, and that's where the wound healing needs to take place. Wound healing requires many and various types of processes. Many different processes need to take place, and they involve immune cells and other types of cells, and a lot of different types of lipid involved in the process. Why lipids? Because the damage is to the epithelial cell membranes, and all cell membranes are made of lipids. It is all too complex to discuss here. The important thing to appreciate is that if these processes are episodically interrupted and restarted, then the repair process becomes more and more involved. And if there is damage to the repair processes as well, then the wound becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why the plaque becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. It is this situation that is exploited in the foul gameplay. They do not understand the biology involved. They simply know that if you repeatedly attack over a period of time, then you're going to get a result, a problem, a heart attack, in other words. So the aim is to repeatedly attack the person, to pose a concealed threat, in other words, and thereby create a situation in a relatively short period of time, even within a week or two, where there will be large plaques formed in the blood vessels that can then be moved, affected, and I'll explain that in a little while. The medical scientists believe that these plaques form over a long period of time, years. The reason they believe that is because they see it in the long term and they see it developing in the long term. However, they also see a stress response, a fight or flight response right across the board, all of disease. But they don't seem to have associated the two, that the high bodily reactivity, the fight or flight response, will create problems in the arteries, though to some extent it is recognized. This problem of arteriosclerosis can occur gradually over a long period of time, but it can also be created in a very short period of time. I think 2 weeks, maybe a bit longer, but I would say well within a month. Then, when they estimate that the person has a serious enough condition in their arteries, they will then pose a more serious and very sudden concealed threat. However, this time it is usually, though not always, done after they have either angered the person or used a situation where the person has higher bodily reactivity, like having gone for a long walk, at the end of a long walk, or more intensely playing football, somehow engaged in physical activity. When the threat is posed, of course, it's going to suddenly raise the blood pressure to a very high level, and that may break the plaque. If the plaque is large enough, then a large enough piece will break off and it will travel down the artery, which goes to a smaller and smaller diameter. And at some point, it may block the artery. That will then cause a heart attack. So, what can you do to prevent this problem? It may be impossible to not have any injury in the arterial walls, because after all, some amount of high blood pressure and turbulence will create some damage. However, if you know about the concealed threat, then you will recognize that there will be periods of time when you're feeling hot or more energy. And you can realize then that those periods of time is where there is a concealed threat. The aim is not to carry out the threat. The aim is only to affect you so that you have a stress response. And that can be done for any number of reasons. But a stress response will cause you to run high blood pressure and therefore problem and damage in the arteries. So the solution, you don't need to react at all, really. But even though we can't not react at all, because after all it is normal to have some stress response, that stress response can be considerably less when we know what's going on. So we don't have to react to the extent that we would in ignorance, because we know that it's done for influence only. There is no real danger, and that will prevent any real big build-up of plaques in the arteries, and also help the body to conduct the healing processes more efficiently, more effectively. So you can remain calm as you can, simply by knowing that you are being threatened, but that the threat is not aimed to be carried out, only aimed to influence you. And yes, it does take a little bit of practice, but if you're being hassled on a daily basis, then you've got plenty of time to use the knowledge, train yourself to remain calm and prevent any serious event. Even if you were to develop a largish plaque, you're still too alert for them to cause a problem for you that it would break and thereby cause a heart attack. They won't get what they want.